So, Sheikh, let's first talk about your rejecting of the position as a chaplain with the Austin Police Department, which you first accepted, I believe, and then
Yeah.
you rejected. So,
Yes.
firstly, why did you accept the position? And secondly, why did you reject it?
Sure, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We begin with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. All the praises for Him and the peace and blessings be upon His messenger Muhammad. So, the context of being offered a chaplain position, which is actually a volunteer position, but you still wear a police uniform, but it just says chaplain on it. So, it would be a discernibly visible presence of a Muslim. Instead of having a cross lapel, it would have a star and crescent. And so they were very excited to say we have diversity of representation, and we have an imam also as a chaplain. The context, again, was there was some vandalism happening in the mosque, and the Austin Police Department actually had a very active role in safety and security for the masjid. We also had, of course, private security and within the volunteers here, but there was a lot of give and take between the police department and this masjid in particular. Um, and one of the senior people in the APD, they approached me and they said, we would love to have you as a chaplain. I said, let me think about it. And right away, one of the concerns was the perception of the police, particularly in the African American community. But in general, some of the abuses and some of the transgressions were, um, you know, going beyond their duty in terms of crossing the line with abusive behaviors, with brutality, and so on. So I never actually put on a uniform, but I had accepted, and then coronavirus happened. And so things got postponed in terms of training and so on. So, we can discuss it further, but the people that I interacted with, uh, as people, as persons. I mean, the senior person I met when I met him on different occasions. One when he was in a uniform, another time, so he's representing an institution. Uh, and another time I met him just in plain clothes. And so I think the meeting in plain clothes helped me to identify or have a rapport with that particular senior person as a person. And what affected my decision was that a person may be having their own positions, their own opinions, their own morality in which they interact with others. But as a police department, what I started noticing and experiencing firsthand was some of the excessive force of the police on peaceful protesters. For example, when I went to one of the protests and saw the tear gas and the pepper spray, and people, instead of seeing the police as protecting them, they were actually fearing the police. And so when I saw that, when I experienced that, of people running away from the police, I said, there's something wrong with this equation, and I don't want to be a part of a system that promotes such actions, or tolerates even such actions. And so this is why I decided, to retract my acceptance to being a chaplain. It doesn't mean that a chaplain is a spiritual doctor, if you will, for people in a particular work environment. So I still, from the outside, as an imam, anybody who comes to me for counsel, whether they are in the military or they happen to be police or they come to an imam for counsel, spiritual counsel, then I will give it to them. If they have moral quandaries and dilemmas, then I'll give it to them. But without being an official representative from the Austin Police Department, I felt that would be a betrayal to those people who are being oppressed and so on. And so those are some of the concerns which I had.
I think that some people might look at that as unorthodox, that the first opportunity a Muslim has to be a chaplain, they should jump to it. A lot of masajid to address Black Lives Matter have invited police officers to their masajid. There's been a lot of interactions, some say that even more than before, with the police departments. There are many Muslims who are offended by this. So, in comparison, your action is doing the opposite of what some masajid are doing, and it's really conflicting between the Muslim people. What is your opinion on building relationships with police departments throughout America?
Yeah. So, I mean, the overall feel for this actually has many different layers, and many different complexities. One layer is the way an immigrant population reacts to law enforcement, and the way an indigenous population reacts to law enforcement. And I think that definitely has a part in how the police are perceived and how we deal with them. I think that's one level. There's another layer where Muslims felt, and particularly masajid and Muslim institutions, they felt infringed upon, and even intimidated by the federal level of law enforcement from the FBI. And so there were a lot of what they would call outreach type meetings with masjid officials, with masjid imams, and with the advice from CARE and Council on American Islamic Relations. Masajid, they began to decline or make sure that a lawyer was present in those kind of meetings. So I think there was a level of distrust, mistrust with the federal level of law enforcement, with the FBI, because of many cases, and unfortunately, some cases of infiltration of masajid and those kind of things. So it was seen that the local level was different, but the more you drill down, the more you see the same sort of problems, even sometimes greater, without mentioning names or those kind of things. Senior levels of the police been trained by the Israeli military or those affiliated with Israeli military in Israel, receive what they call terrorist kind of training, and then they come back here to the States, and even applying some of the police tactics from the Israeli military and Israeli security forces. And so this clear connection, which is not imagined or a conspiracy theory, is something that if people are made aware of it and see something that is close to the Muslims, which is the occupation of Palestine, and also seeing the parallels with the, if you want to use that word, the occupation of black communities in the United States by police, an endemic racism and brutality, and a failure to address the real underlying socioeconomic problems in the African American community in an effective way. I think that gives pause, at least, if people were more aware of that. And so to answer the question about why would masajid interact more with the police, it's again this relationship of safety and security for masajid. But I think more masajid are going to lean towards private security as opposed to the local law enforcement.
What is an advice to Muslim communities and how they can, and still involved with local communities, but still respect, like you said, the African American community as well, still, represent Black Lives Matter and support it? Is there a middle ground to this? Do you have any advice on that?
Sure. I think what's important is to establish relationships, personal relationships. So I think Muslims should reach out to the African American community, to the Black community, go into the neighborhoods with African Americans. So some of what I do personally is with Imam Asim from the East Austin community of Islam. So he is an African American imam who is active, as well as some of the other brothers from that community. And so interacting with them, getting their feel, on things can really affect the decision making for me as an imam as well. And so I think that's because we have established a relationship over time and a relationship of mutual respect and mutual trust. So I think that similarly with people in the police department, again, separating between the institutional official representation and the personal, just human interaction, I think having those sorts of experiences as an imam, because everybody comes to you as an imam for various purposes, gives, yes, that there are perspectives, that there are differences. While there are perspectives and differences, I think there's also a clear line of morality that we are called upon by the Quran to stand against injustice, to stand on the side of the oppressed, not on the side of the oppressor. And I think beyond that stance, it's important for immigrant and indigenous Muslims to work together to address socioeconomic issues in the black community, broader black community, African American community, whether Muslim or not. So one of the things that I mentioned in a khutbah, for example, is there's a problem of many Muslims, unfortunately, who have gas stations or liquor stores, and they're selling alcohol in the African American community, which is a poison, which is undermining a lot of the social fabric in the African American community. So for Muslims to play that kind of a role, and we had to call it out and say, to stop those sale of alcohol, find other products, find not employees from the African American community, but partners, business partners. Say, what does your community need? What is economically profitable, but also shows the partnership between Muslims and between Black or African American entrepreneurs, which there are many. And so I think that kind of a partnership is important to establish. I also, when I was an imam in Little Rock, Arkansas, I reached out to the African American Muslim community as well there. And they were very receptive. They have their complaints about the overall Muslim community. But when we reach out to them, they welcome it. And one of the kind of bold steps we took is in a large Eid gathering prayer. You don't see this that common in a mixed indigenous with immigrant population. We asked the local African American imam to lead the prayer and khutbah. And so it was a very unique kind of situation. And I think we need to have more leadership from the African American Muslim community and encourage that leadership as well as that guidance and counsel. And I think bringing an older generation with a younger generation, bringing indigenous population with immigrant population, this collaboration can only bring more positive benefits, not only for the Muslim community, but for the overall society that we are called, as Allah said in the Quran, to be a benefit for all of humanity.
Is there any last words you want to give or advice on this matter or issue?
Yeah, I think it's important for Muslims not to subscribe to stereotypes or simple explanations for complex social, political, economic issues. And, I myself want to become more educated. There are a lot of books that a person can read about the African American experience, about policing in general. And you will see there's a broad spectrum of opinions. And so, at that protest that I was at, there were some pretty extreme positions that were being espoused. And there were people in the middle, and then there were people who were more about working within the system to bring about change, and people who were using words, which I'm not going to repeat, about the system and about cops in general. So I think, hearing each voice and then comparing it to the Quran, which is the divine authority when it comes to morality and ethics and society, and then coming to a conclusion, an informed conclusion. And respecting people who may have differences of opinion, but also stating your position clearly, emphatically. When I first posted that on Facebook, I got a lot of support, but also there were voices, even from within the Muslim community, which said, why are you doing that? And what gave me the initial impetus to also accept being a chaplain was a pretty senior imam in the United States, nationally and globally. He strongly encouraged me to become a chaplain with the police department. And so we got a lot of backlash also, in addition to the support of why would you do that? This is an opportunity to represent Muslims. So, and some of them were chaplains themselves. So I respect their decision and choice, but at the same time, I have to state clearly what my position, informed from Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet upon him, would be in a situation like